that people take away from this movie? You know what I mean? Overall, like, what made you think of just such random things? Like, it all just seemed random, but I'm guessing it has to have a point. What are you hoping we see it as?
Well, the things that I've been talking about having to do with, it feels to me, as I was, I started acting professionally when I was 13. And I started taking acting classes when I was 15. And when I was 16, I learned to drive, and I started going to all the revival theaters in Los Angeles. And most of the films that were being shown in these revival theaters were from the 50s, 60s, or 70s. And they were films that were asking questions. And they were asking the audience to ask questions about things that were given. This was the community of filmmaking that I thought I was stepping into as an actor when I was 18. It wasn't until later that I realized that the corporate community had changed, almost diametrically opposite to what I had thought I was stepping into. I realized really that the corporate film community, and there's an entire generation that basically has been raised in films that are dictating to them almost the opposite of the films that I was watching. Films that are dictating to not think. Films that are saying, you must think this way. And if you don't think this way, there's something wrong with you. And I feel the opposite about that. I want to be involved with films that let people think about things. Now, I'm not saying this is the only kind of filmmaking that does that, because I don't think that. I think there's a whole variation of filmmaking styles that can do it. Like I said, I have a strong interest in hero's journey story structure, and I think there can be great things that happen with that. But there's also a syntax that's a traditional syntax. It's not as popular as the hero's journey story structure that most people, I'm kind of using that phrase wrong, but the type of storytelling that most corporately funded and distributed filmmaking works in. The syntax of this film is more similar to the syntax that someone like Buñuel would use, which has a poetic, interpretive element, although I would argue that Buñuel, even at his most so-called abstract, is squarely working within hero's journey story structure, but one really has to know those patterns to see them and then feel that you can make interpretations out of them. Like, I would argue that Un Chien Andalou by Buñuel is highly structured. Somebody else might look at it and say, this is a bunch of random images. Even Buñuel himself said when he was writing it with Salvador Dali, that was what they were doing, was they were coming up with the most random images that they put together. But to me, there's a very clear storyline that goes into it. It's the way my mind works. I'll see things that are seemingly non-related, and there will be a new relation that comes together for me. Sometimes people think that way very much, and sometimes people don't think that way at all. It's hard to say. But I do think there is a strong argument for both types of filmmaking to exist and give people good questions. So there are strong hero's journey story structures that let people give questions, and then there are more interpretable syntax films that can also give certain people certain kinds of questions. Sometimes people get very frustrated with those what would be maybe seemingly randomly juxtaposed images in these types of films, but some people get a lot out of that. To me, the kind of films that have very strong hero's journey story structure, there can be great films, and most of my favorite films sit in that kind of hero's journey story structure, but the ones that I love are the ones that still make people have questions. There are also the kind that I would label as being propagandistic. And I feel like most of the films that are corporately funded and distributed at this point in time, unfortunately, are sitting in the realm of something that makes this culture think in certain ways that probably is not best for the culture itself. That's my opinion. I could be wrong about it, but I feel a strong emotional reaction to that because growing up in the industry, I thought I was stepping into the kind of films that were going to be asking questions. And I feel that that's not what's happening. I still make most of my living in the corporate film world, and I'm grateful to be doing that. And there's a value in working in films that are, for example, children's movies. And I would say 99.9% of the movies, in fact 100% of the movies that are corporately financed, because you can't, no corporate entities will distribute a film that's rated NC-17, which means above somebody who's 18 years old, which is an adult, which means that there are no films that are financed strictly for corporately funded and distributed strictly for adults at this point in time. And conversely, that means all films are for children that are corporately financed and distributed. What does that mean for the culture at large? There's something to be said for films that are for children. There's no question. There should be films that are strictly for children. This film is not a film for children. No one under 18 is allowed. It's supposed to be that way. I wouldn't want children to come see it. It's not for that. But what is disturbing is that there are no corporately funded and distributed films at this point in time strictly for adults. So what this film is, and like